when a quiet Roman waitress, with a degree in criminal psychology, overhears guards whispering, in Italian about 23:45, at the back exit. She realizes her mysterious Friday night customer and the powerful Lorenzo Vitale is walking into a death trap. In a single moment of courage, she warns him, and her life shatters into the dangerous world he rules. From candlelit rooftops to blood-stained alleys, one decision binds them together. Love born in danger, and a destiny written under Rome's lights. If you want to know how one warning turned into a love that rewrote her fate, watch the full story till the end. Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us, where are you watching this story from? Hit the like button and subscribe for more stories that blur the line between danger and destiny. The clink of crystal glasses and the murmur of soft conversation filled the candlelit dining room. I balanced 3 plates along my forearm, weaving between white-clothed tables with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent years navigating tight spaces with delicate cargo. La Pergola, one of Rome's most exclusive rooftop restaurants, was in full evening bloom around me. Couples leaned in close over flickering candles. A group of businessmen laughed near the terrace doors, their cigars sending ribbons of smoke toward the starry sky. It was another elegant Roman night, at least on the surface. Table 7 wants an extra bottle of Amarone, and the couple at 4 asked if you could take their photo, Julia teased as she breezed by with a tray of tiramisu. My colleague's eyes sparkled knowingly. And guess who just walked in? Alto, scuro e pericoloso. Your tall, dark, and dangerous admirer. A familiar flutter stirred in my stomach. I didn't need to turn to know who she meant. For the past 2 months, Lorenzo Vitale had come in every Friday, always requesting my section. He arrived late, usually alone, or with one quiet associate, and occupied the corner table near the window overlooking the city lights. He was unfailingly polite, tipped generously, and carried an aura of quiet authority that both intrigued and unnerved me. And yes, he was dangerously handsome. Dark hair impeccably cut, a charcoal suit tailored to perfection, and eyes the color of amber that seemed to miss nothing. Perhaps he's just here for the cacio e pepe, I muttered, smoothing my black apron to hide the sudden onset of nerves. In truth, Lorenzo's attention set off a cascade of conflicting feelings. The trained part of my brain, the part with a master's in criminal psychology, picked up subtle tells in his behavior each time I served him. The way he always chose a seat with his back to a wall, the measured sweeps his gaze made, as if mapping exits and assessing threats even during a simple meal. The quiet tension coiled in his frame, betraying that his expensive suit concealed a body used to action. Most servers might not notice these things, but I did. I noticed everything. I approached table 4 to snap the tourist's photo, positioning the camera so the distant glow of the Colosseum crowned them. As I handed the phone back, my eyes drifted to the entrance. Lorenzo had just arrived, exchanging a brief word with the maitre d' before striding to his usual spot. He moved with a predatory grace. Even those who didn't know him instinctively straightened or hushed as he passed, reacting to the unseen gravity of his presence. Rome is a city accustomed to power. Politicians, tycoons, old aristocracy. But this man exuded a different kind of power altogether, one that lived in the shadows. Julia caught my eye from across the room and waggled her brows in encouragement. With a steadying breath, I lifted a bottle of our finest Barolo from the rack, Lorenzo's preferred vintage, and headed to greet him. "Buonasera, Signor Vitale," I said warmly as I reached his table. I kept my tone professional, but I couldn't suppress the thrill that always ran through me when those amber eyes met mine. "Welcome back. Your usual wine this evening?" Lorenzo inclined his head in a subtle nod. "Per favore." His voice was deep, cultured, with that slight Roman accent giving weight to each word. Somehow he made even a polite please sound like an order. As I poured the wine, I realized my hand was steady, but my heart was racing. Get it together, Chiara. I'd served foreign diplomats and movie stars here without batting an eye. But this man unsettled me in ways I couldn't quite explain. Perhaps it was because I'd spent years studying men like him, or at least men who moved through the world with dangerous secrets. And though I had no proof, every instinct whispered that Lorenzo Vitale was exactly that sort of man. "Long week?" he asked, observing me over the rim of his glass after taking an appreciative sip of the Barolo. I must have looked surprised at the personal question because he gave the faintest hint of a smile. "You seem a bit distracted." "Oh," I flushed, nearly fumbling for a response. It was true. I had been distracted, but not by fatigue. I'd been puzzling over Lorenzo himself, wondering why a man like him spent his Friday nights here. Surely a man of his means had private chefs or more secure haunts. Nothing I can't handle, just the usual dinner rush. I managed a light shrug. He nodded, though a glint in his eyes told me he didn't believe me. Lorenzo missed very little, of that I was certain. I was about to excuse myself when a flicker of movement over his shoulder drew my attention. Near the bar, a man in a navy blazer was nursing a Negroni. I'd noticed him earlier in passing. Mid-40s, neatly groomed. Nothing outwardly remarkable. Yet now his posture was subtly different. He wasn't leaning casually on the bar anymore. He sat upright, alert. His gaze kept drifting toward our table via the mirror behind the bar. The fine hairs on the back of my neck prickled. Another unfamiliar face caught my eye 2 tables down from Lorenzo. A gaunt man picking at a plate of ossobuco, dining alone. He'd arrived just a few minutes after Lorenzo. His seat gave him a clear view of Lorenzo's profile. Though he forked food to his mouth at regular intervals, I realized he wasn't really eating. The veal on his plate remained largely untouched. He was watching while pretending to dine. My pulse kicked up. 3 months ago, I might have brushed off these observations as paranoia, but working in a restaurant had unexpectedly sharpened the skills I honed in my criminology courses. I could tell when a couple on a first date was about to sour by their body language. I could spot the corporate bigwig trying too hard to impress his guests by the way he spoke a little too loudly. And I could absolutely tell when someone in a dining room wasn't there to savor the food or the view at all. Tonight I counted at least 3 of them. In addition to the man at the bar and the gaunt diner, I spotted a third figure lurking near the entrance to the terrace. A burly fellow in an ill-fitting suit who looked distinctly out of place among our refined clientele. He wasn't seated. He stood as if deciding whether to step out for fresh air, but he had positioned himself with a direct line of sight toward Lorenzo's table. His fingers tapped lightly against his thigh, not the impatient tap of a bored guest, but a rhythmic motion, like someone keeping time. Or signaling. I realized I had frozen mid-pour with the wine. Lorenzo's sharp gaze flicked from the bottle in my hand back to my face. "Signorina Moretti?" he prompted softly. I finished pouring, hoping my pleasant smile hid the tumult inside. "Mi scusi, sir." Setting the bottle down, I stepped back. My mind was racing. Was I seeing a coordinated threat or concocting one out of coincidence? 3 men, all singularly focused on Lorenzo. The positioning was too perfect. One with a view of the entrance, one with eyes on him via the mirror, one covering the terrace exit. And the way they carried themselves screamed anything but casual diners. Maybe I was being paranoid. Studying criminal behavior for years can do that. But if I was right, Lorenzo Vitale was being set up for something awful. And soon. I forced myself to move away from Lorenzo's table, unsure of my next move but certain I had to do something. At the server station, Julia cornered me, concern in her brow. "Chiara, stai bene? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Fine," I lied, voice barely above a whisper. Over Julia's shoulder, I saw the gaunt man at table 9 slide his hand under his napkin. The burly man by the terrace was now inching toward the side door that led to the kitchen corridor, exactly where Lorenzo would pass if he exited that way. My heart slammed against my ribs. 15 minutes. That's how long until Lorenzo typically finished his meal and left by the back route to the private parking area. I glanced at the ornate clock above the bar. 9:30 p.m. If they were going to make a move, it would be when he headed out, likely around 11:45. I had to warn him. But how without tipping off the watchers? My mind churned. The police were out of the question. These men would act long before any squad car arrived, and who knew how many innocent people could get hurt in a shootout. Our restaurant security guard was an affable retiree who mostly checked coats and occasionally bounced drunk tourists. He wouldn't stand a chance. No, the only person in this room who could handle an ambush was the target himself. Summoning every ounce of courage, I grabbed a basket of fresh bread as a pretense and made my way back to Lorenzo's table. My palms were sweating and my throat felt dry. He looked up, mildly puzzled by my return so soon. I set the bread down and leaned in slightly, pretending to straighten his silverware. Keeping my face neutral, I murmured, "Please don't react and don't look, but you're in danger. 3 men are watching you." I named their locations softly, my eyes on the tablecloth as if discussing the evening's specials. "They're armed, and they plan to ambush you when you leave." Lorenzo's expression didn't flicker, but I felt a taut stillness come over him. He reached for a slice of bread casually. In a voice so low I barely caught it, he asked, How sure are you? Almost certain, I breathed. Their behavior ticks every box for a setup. I overheard one on a phone mentioning waiting until people clear out. They have the exits covered. I think they intend to strike when you head to your car. He was quiet a beat. Do they know you've noticed them? I don't think so. I've been careful. Brava. He paused, as if considering options. Then, still keeping his voice at a polite murmur, he said, Thank you, Kiara. Now listen carefully. I want you to stay inside when I leave. Do not go near the exits. Those amber eyes held mine, deadly serious. Capisci? I nodded minutely. What are you going to do? Lorenzo set a generous tip of cash on the table and rose smoothly. For one terrifying moment, I thought he meant to confront the men right here, but instead, he simply adjusted his cufflinks. In a normal tone, he said, Thank you for the excellent service, as always. He walked away from the table toward the front of the restaurant. The man at the bar stiffened in surprise, not expecting him to leave the dining room so soon. I realized Lorenzo was heading not for his usual back exit, but for the main entrance in the opposite direction. Drawing the threat away, the three watchers exchanged subtle glances and began moving too, one toward each exit route. A spike of fear shot through me. I had warned him, but now what? If he was stepping outside, those men would converge on him out front, and he was alone. Or was he? As Lorenzo neared the hostess podium, I saw him reach into his suit jacket and touch something, perhaps a weapon or a phone. I couldn't just stand by. Ignoring Julia's confused call, I slipped through the staff door into the kitchen and sprinted along the corridor to the side exit that opened into the alley behind the restaurant. If the attackers thought he'd go out front, maybe Lorenzo was actually circling around. Maybe he had backup waiting. I didn't know, and my heart was in my throat. I burst out into the cool night alley. The narrow lane behind the restaurant was lit only by a dim security lamp above the kitchen door. Garbage bins lined one side, and beyond, the alley opened toward the small rear parking lot. My ears picked up muffled scuffling and a grunt of pain from around the corner. Keeping low, I edged forward and peeked toward the lot. A sleek black sedan idled there, its headlights off, engine quiet. By the glow of a street lamp beyond, I recognized one of Lorenzo's regular drivers standing beside the car, gun drawn. A second man, one of the ambushers in the navy blazer, was kneeling on the ground, clutching his arm. So Lorenzo did have backup, I realized with a flood of relief. That relief died an instant later when I heard a sharp crack of gunfire from the direction of the alley mouth. I shrank back against the wall. Shadows danced crazily as a figure ran into view, the gaunt diner from inside, pistol in hand, firing toward the sedan. Sparks flew off the sedan's hood. Lorenzo's driver ducked for cover, returning fire. The alley echoed with thunderous blasts. Suddenly, the side door behind me banged open. The burly man from the terrace barreled out, nearly colliding with me. His hand clamped onto my upper arm like a vice. I yelped as he hauled me forward. In his other fist, I saw the glint of a knife. Stai ferma, he growled. Stay still. He dragged me into the open, positioning me in front of him as he advanced toward the parking area where Lorenzo's car and men were. My mind screamed in panic. I stomped hard on the man's foot and twisted, breaking his grip for a second. He cursed and raised the knife. Before he could strike, a shot rang out. The burly man jerked, a red spray misting the air. He toppled like a felled tree, landing hard on the cobblestones at my feet. I stared, stunned. Lorenzo stood a few paces behind us in the alley, arm outstretched, a smoking handgun in his grip. His expression was grim. He'd come up the alley from the front entrance while his foes were focused elsewhere, flanking them. He glanced at me, eyes flashing with concern, but had no time to speak. The gaunt shooter at the alley mouth had noticed me and the burly man. Now he swung his weapon toward Lorenzo. Vitale, he shouted, firing wildly. I shrieked and dropped flat as bullets whizzed overhead. Lorenzo lunged behind a stack of wooden produce crates just in time. Plaster exploded from the restaurant's brick wall where a bullet hit. The black sedan's engine roared to life. Lorenzo's driver pulled up into the alley, headlights suddenly blazing on the gaunt gunman from behind. The man spun at the light, and in that split second of disorientation, Lorenzo moved. He stepped from cover and with two thunderous shots, dropped the shooter to the ground. Silence fell, broken only by my own ragged breathing and the echo of distant sirens rising over the city. The entire fight had lasted less than a minute, though it felt like an eternity. Lorenzo strode toward me, slipping his gun back under his jacket. Kiara, are you hurt? His voice was sharp with worry. I'm fine. I managed, though my legs felt like jelly. My eyes flickered to the fallen ambusher inches away, then to the other man writhing by the sedan, and the one Lorenzo had shot. 3 attackers neutralized in moments. It was staggering. Before I could process further, Lorenzo's hands were on my shoulders, steadying me. "Did he cut you?" His gaze raked over me, searching for injury. I looked down at myself. Incredibly, aside from a scuff on my arm and some spatters of the attacker's blood on my skirt, I was unharmed. No, I don't think so." His jaw tightened as he followed my glance to the blood on my uniform. Gently, he guided me away from the bodies and opened the rear car door. "Get in," he ordered, but not unkindly. The driver, Marco, I now recognized in the front seat, had already hit the gas. Another of Lorenzo's men was dragging the wounded Navy Blazer attacker into a second vehicle that had appeared behind us. I obeyed numbly, sliding into the plush back seat. Lorenzo got in beside me, and the door locks clicked, just as the first blue lights of police cars splashed at the far end of the alley. Marco sped us away into the night, before the authorities could arrive at the scene of shattered quiet behind La Pergola. I stared back through the tinted window at the receding chaos, restaurant staff peering out, police vans screeching in. None of them knew that the blonde waitress being whisked away had just stepped irrevocably over an invisible line, from the world of ordinary people into the world of Lorenzo Vitale. In the quiet sanctuary of the moving car, adrenaline drained and a trembling numbness took hold. I realized I was still wearing Lorenzo's suit jacket. Somehow in the fray, he had draped it over me. It smelled of his subtle cologne, comforting in a way I couldn't articulate. He broke the silence, voice low and calm. "You saved my life tonight. You realize that?" I swallowed, finding my voice at last. "You would have seen them eventually." He shook his head. "Not in time. You saw what my own men did not. That's twice I owe you, Chiara." I managed a faint, shaky smile. Maybe I just really didn't want to clean up a murder scene on a Friday night. To my surprise, Lorenzo let out a soft chuckle. The sound was brief, but it eased some of the tension between us. "Whatever your reasons, I'm in your debt." A shadow crossed his face as he studied me. "Those men, did they hurt you at all? He grabbed you, that bastardo, with the knife." "I'm okay," I insisted, and realized I meant it. Shaken, yes. Terrified, absolutely, but physically unharmed. Thanks to you. His eyes softened just a fraction. "You were remarkably brave. Foolhardy," he added, brows drawing together slightly. "But brave. I told you to stay inside." "I couldn't," I said quietly. "I couldn't just watch and do nothing." Lorenzo was silent at that, but he regarded me with a kind of respect I hadn't seen before. After a moment, he inclined his head. "Well, it seems my instincts about you were correct." I glanced at him quizzically. "When we first met," he clarified, "I knew there was more to you than an innocent waitress, and tonight you proved it." He gestured to Marco in the rearview mirror. "My men are professionals, but even they didn't spot all the signs you did. Where did you learn to observe like that?" I cleared my throat, folding my shaking hands in my lap. "I have a degree in criminal psychology, behavior analysis specifically. I was going to pursue a career in law enforcement or maybe research, but life took me in a different direction. Bills to pay." I shrugged, embarrassed suddenly. "So here I am, a waitress who apparently can't turn off her training." Marco whistled low from the front. "Impressive." Lorenzo looked genuinely intrigued. "That explains a lot." We fell quiet as the car sped beyond the city center. I watched Rome's ancient streets blur past, lit by golden street lamps. My studio apartment was back there somewhere, cozy but lonely. And here I was instead, racing toward parts unknown with a mafia boss. Yes, I was pretty sure now exactly what Lorenzo was. The word hadn't been spoken, but the telltale signs were all there. Armed guards, ambushes, that air of command. I should have been panicking. Perhaps a part of me was, but another part, the criminologist who had secretly yearned for something beyond case studies and theory, felt a strange exhilaration, as if I'd jumped into one of the thrillers I used to read late at night. Eventually, we turned up a winding drive on the outskirts of the city. Through wrought iron gates and past rows of cypress trees, we pulled up to a gorgeous villa of white stone and soft uplighting. The place was both serene and heavily secured. I glimpsed cameras swiveling and a pair of discreet guards at the door. A composed woman in a tailored suit opened the car door for us. "Signore, everything is prepared," she said. Her gaze flickered to me, and though she managed a polite smile, I saw the curiosity there. It wasn't every day her boss escorted a blood-spattered waitress into his home in the dead of night. "Valentina, please see that Miss Moretti gets cleaned up and settled in a guest room," Lorenzo instructed. "And have the medic check her arm." I looked down to see a darkening bruise where the thug's grip had been. I hadn't even noticed in the adrenaline rush. "Really, I'm fine," I began to protest. Lorenzo's look silenced me. "Humor me." Then, more gently, "I need to debrief with my people. We'll talk after. You're safe here, Chiara. No one will harm you under my roof." Under his protection. The weight of those words wasn't lost on me. I nodded and allowed Valentina to guide me inside. The interior of the villa was stunning. Marble floors, art-lined hallways, high ceilings with frescoed details. But I barely registered it as Valentina ushered me into a warm, tiled bathroom. Within minutes, a female house medic appeared, efficiently treating the minor scrapes on my knees and the bruise on my arm. Another staff member provided me with a soft cashmere robe to change into while my stained uniform was whisked away. When I emerged, cleaned up and wrapped in the robe, I felt like a different person. One floating in a strange limbo between my old life and whatever awaited tomorrow. Valentina returned and led me to an inviting study where a low fire crackled in the hearth. "He'll join you shortly," she said kindly, pressing a steaming mug of chamomile tea into my hands before withdrawing. Alone, I sank into a leather armchair by the fire, cradling the tea for warmth I didn't really need. My mind was finally catching up to the night's events, and with it came a tremble in my limbs that I couldn't quite still. True to his word, Lorenzo appeared a few minutes later. He had changed out of his blood-specked suit into black slacks and a slate-gray sweater. The more relaxed attire did nothing to diminish his quiet authority. If anything, it made him look younger, almost approachable, if you didn't notice the holster still strapped at his side. He took the seat opposite me, studying me in the firelight. "How are you holding up?" I opened my mouth to say fine, but what came out instead was an honest, shaky laugh. "I have no idea. I think I'm still in shock." Lorenzo's lips curved gently. "That's understandable. Few people ever see what you saw tonight." "Few waitresses, you mean?" I quipped, sipping the tea. It did help soothe my raw throat. A comfortable silence settled for a moment. The fire's glow danced in his eyes as he regarded me. "You're not a typical waitress, though, are you?" I sighed. "No, I suppose not. I always wanted to use my degree to help people. Just never imagined it would play out like this." I gestured vaguely, encompassing the grand house, the shootout we'd narrowly escaped. "You did help someone," he said softly. "You helped me, and likely saved others in the crossfire." I met his gaze. I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd said nothing and something terrible happened. After a beat of hesitation, I admitted, "And I didn't want to see you get hurt." That earned me a long, searching look. Lorenzo sat forward, forearms resting on his knees. "Chiara, you realize what's happening here, don't you? What you're caught up in." I swallowed. "I have my suspicions. You're involved in things beyond the law." It was a delicate way to phrase organized crime. "And now those things have entangled me." He inclined his head. "If you wish to leave, to go back to your normal life, say the word. I'll have a car take you wherever you want, and I'll make sure you're protected. You have my gratitude always." My heart thumped. Part of me yearned for the comforting mundanity of my tiny apartment, the routine of serving pasta and wine. But a larger part of me knew it was too late for that. I had crossed the line. If those men had bosses, they might consider me a loose end. And even if they didn't, I wasn't sure I could just forget everything and pretend none of this happened. "I don't want to walk away," I found myself saying. The truth of it solidified in my chest as I spoke. "Not yet. There's too much unresolved." A flicker of what might have been relief passed over Lorenzo's face. Then it settled. "You'll stay here tonight. In the morning we can assess the situation. There may still be threats, associates of the men who attacked me." I nodded. "Your enemies will know something went wrong. They might come looking." "Exactly, and they may not differentiate between me and the woman who warned me." A shadow crossed his features. Anger at that prospect. "I won't let anyone harm you, Chiara." The intensity of his tone made me shiver. Here was the dangerous man I had sensed from the start. A man who controlled violence like a tool. Yet he was also the man who had shielded me and offered me his protection. The duality fascinated and frightened me. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I owe you some honesty. You should know what you're involved in, to make an informed choice." A wry smile touched his lips. Though by now I suspect you've guessed. I mustered a faint smile of my own. Let's just say I won't be shocked. Lorenzo's gaze drifted to the flames as he spoke. My family, we have been in this business for generations. From the outside, we're investors, entrepreneurs. But our power runs deeper. We protect certain territories in this city. We have alliances, rivals. The men tonight, his jaw clenched. They were sent by a rival who wants to remove me and take control of Rome's underworld for himself. Massimo Ruggeri, I murmured, recalling the name I'd overheard the phone man utter softly in the restaurant. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed a fraction. Yes, you even caught that detail. Ruggeri is ambitious and impatient. He violated the unwritten rules by trying to kill me in such a public setting. A fierce resolve crystallized inside me, hardening around the lingering terror for my sister and everyone else I cared about. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. What will you do now? His expression turned steely. Eliminate the threat. Ruggeri made this personal, and he won't stop until one of us is finished. I have to strike first. Lorenzo looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. I need your help, Chiara. Ruggeri will expect brute force. He won't expect you. Your insight, your training, I want you to help me anticipate his next move. He was asking me to help him take down a Mafia rival. The very idea should have made me recoil. But when I thought of the fear in that alley, of what could have happened if we'd been a few seconds slower, of the blood on my uniform, I found no sympathy for Ruggeri or his men. They were murderers who would have shot a restaurant full of people to get to Lorenzo, and they had nearly killed my sister's foolish waitress of a sibling for interfering. I straightened in my chair. Whatever it takes, I said quietly and meant it. For the next 2 days we worked around the clock, drawing on my knowledge of criminal psychology and every detail I knew about La Pergola. I helped Lorenzo and his men plan a precise counter-ambush. By the time the deadline arrived, we were ready. Ruggeri's message had come as predicted, directing Lorenzo to meet at La Pergola, alone, if he wanted Bianca alive. Of course, we had no intention of Lorenzo going in alone or blind. By midnight on the appointed day, I was already inside the closed restaurant in disguise, ready to play my part. The dining room was dark and eerily quiet, a far cry from the lively ambiance of 2 nights ago. I crouched behind the bar, dressed in a spare server's uniform I had retrieved from my locker, and peered through the lattice of the wine rack. Through my earpiece, I heard the faint crackle of Lorenzo's voice outside. Positions. Eyes on Chiara's signal. With a deep breath, I eased up and surveyed the scene. Ruggeri's men were here. I counted at least 8 spread through the dining area. I recognized 2 from the alley fight, now bandaged and burning for revenge. Bianca was with them. My sister sat tied to a chair at the center of the room, gagged, but visibly unharmed. I had to swallow down a surge of rage at the sight of her wide, terrified eyes, moving carefully in the shadows. I slipped around to get a better view. 3 of Ruggeri's thugs stood in a loose semicircle around Bianca, using her as bait. 2 more lurked by the main entrance, and I spotted at least one on the mezzanine balcony above, likely a sniper. I whispered into my hidden mic, I count 9 hostiles. Bianca is center of the dining room. They're expecting you through the front, Lorenzo. Understood, came his reply, clipped and calm. Right on cue, the front doors of the restaurant swung open. Lorenzo strode in, utterly alone, hands held slightly out to his sides to show he carried no weapon openly. He projected nothing but relaxed confidence, as if he owned the place. In a sense, he did. Bandini Enterprises had a controlling stake in this hotel and its restaurant, one of many legitimate fronts for his family's operations. A stocky man with a shaved head, Ruggeri's lieutenant, stepped forward from beside Bianca, pistol in hand. That's far enough, Vitali, he called. Came alone as instructed? You invited me alone, here I am, Lorenzo replied evenly. His eyes flickered past Bianca, likely cataloging every gun and guard. Release the girl and then we talk. The man barked a laugh. No, we'll talk first. Hand over what our boss wants. Territory, tribute, and maybe she goes free. I clenched my fists. We all knew this was a trap. Ruggeri had no intention of leaving witnesses, deal or no deal, but we needed to draw him out. I shifted slightly to get a clear line of sight on the balcony sniper. He was creeping along the railing, trying to position above Lorenzo. In a low mutter, I warned, Sniper above, left side. Outside, one of Lorenzo's team would be getting into position to handle that. Keep him talking, I urged silently. As if reading my mind, Lorenzo began to speak, tone bored. Ruggeri must be desperate, sending his lapdogs to negotiate. Is he afraid to face me himself? He walked slowly toward the nearest table and casually set his hands on the back of a chair, looking for all the world like a man only mildly inconvenienced. The lieutenant bristled. Enjoy your bravado while it lasts. He'll be along shortly, once we soften you up. He motioned with his gun, and from behind a pillar stepped a familiar face. Paolo, one of Lorenzo's own bodyguards, now wearing a conspicuous red armband. My stomach dropped. Paolo had been a mole. He gave Lorenzo an apologetic shrug, even as he leveled a weapon at his boss's back. Traditore! Lorenzo spat, eyes flashing with genuine hurt and fury. Paolo's face twisted. Mi dispiace, capo. This is just business. Everything happened at once. Now! I hissed into the mic. Lorenzo moved in a blur, spinning just as Paolo pulled the trigger. The traitor's bullet went wide, shattering a chandelier overhead. In that same instant, a dozen things occurred. The lights went out as one of our team killed power. A suppressed shot from the terrace took down the balcony sniper. Marco and 2 others burst in from a side door, weapons blazing at Ruggeri's goons by the entrance. Chaos erupted. I popped up from behind the bar and threw the heavy wine bottle I'd been clutching straight at the stocky lieutenant guarding Bianca. It struck his shoulder, knocking him off balance as he fired wildly toward the muzzle flashes of Lorenzo's men. Within seconds, the dining room devolved into pandemonium, dark shapes ducking and shooting amid overturned tables and flying glass. I bolted from cover, keeping low as I sprinted toward Bianca. I'm here, B. I'm here, I panted, skidding to my knees beside her chair. She made a muffled sound of relief against her gag. With trembling hands, I sawed at her bonds with a pocket knife from my apron. Above us, gunfire cracked and bullets thudded into wood and plaster. Lorenzo's team was systematically clearing the room in their night vision gear, just as planned. A flashbang went off near the coat check, briefly illuminating the scene. Enough for me to see one of Ruggeri's thugs charging toward us through the chaos. Before I could react, a dark figure intercepted the attacker. It was Lorenzo. In the strobe of sporadic gunfire, I caught a glimpse of him grappling the man and delivering a vicious elbow strike that sent the thug crumpling. The ropes binding Bianca snapped under my blade. I ripped the gag from her mouth and pulled her into a fierce hug. Can you walk? I gasped. She nodded, eyes huge in the dark. Aside from raw bruises on her wrists, she looked unharmed. Supporting her, I half-dragged, half-carried my sister toward the back hallway. This way, I urged. We slipped through the service door just as a fresh volley of shots rang out in the dining room behind us. One of Lorenzo's waiting drivers met us in the corridor, hustling Bianca out through the kitchen loading dock to safety. I watched the black sedan peel away with her inside, relief and gratitude flooding me. Bianca was safe, but it wasn't over yet. Not until Ruggeri was finished. Ignoring every instinct screaming at me to stay with my sister, I turned and ran back toward the fight. I emerged into the ravaged dining area to find the shooting had stopped. The room reeked of gunpowder and overturned wine. Bodies of Ruggeri's men lay strewn among splintered furniture. Lorenzo's people were securing the remaining hostiles who had surrendered or were wounded. The faint glow of emergency lights cast an eerie red tint over the scene, and there, near the kitchen doors, I saw them. Lorenzo and a tall, heavy-set man circling each other with murderous intent. Massimo Ruggeri in the flesh, knife in hand, facing down Lorenzo, who wielded a broken chair leg. This was the final duel. They lunged almost in unison. Ruggeri slashed with his blade. Lorenzo parried with the wooden stick, eyes cold and focused. I inched closer, heart in my throat, but didn't dare intervene directly. One wrong move and I could distract Lorenzo fatally. They traded blows in brutal silence. Ruggeri was larger and fueled by rage, swiping furiously with the knife. But Lorenzo was faster and fought with a deadly, calculating precision. He deflected a thrust that would have sliced his throat, taking a shallow cut along his forearm instead. Ruggeri pressed forward with a roar, driving Lorenzo back toward an overturned table. I seized an intact wine bottle from a nearby wreckage, ready to throw if an opportunity arose without risking Lorenzo. Then it happened. Ruggeri overextended, his knife arm lashing out too far. In that blink, Lorenzo sidestepped and trapped Ruggeri's arm, twisting viciously. Bone snapped with an audible crack. Ruggeri bellowed in pain. Lorenzo wrenched the knife free and with a powerful shove, smashed Ruggeri down onto the table. The legs collapsed, and Ruggeri went crashing through wood and glass to the floor, where he lay dazed and groaning. Lorenzo didn't hesitate. He kicked the fallen knife far away, then planted a foot on Ruggeri's chest, gun suddenly in hand and aimed at the man's head. "It's over," he growled. Two of Lorenzo's men rushed in with restraints, yanking a cursing Ruggieri onto his stomach to cuff him tight. In the distance, sirens wailed, drawn no doubt by the cacophony that had spilled into the night. It was over. The room was a ruin, but we had won. I realized I'd been holding my breath. I dropped the bottle from my shaking hand and stumbled toward Lorenzo. He saw me and immediately closed the distance, catching me in a fierce embrace that lifted me off my feet. "Your sister?" he demanded. "Safe," I gasped. "She's safe." He exhaled a breath that was almost a laugh, and for one precious second he pressed his forehead to mine amid the debris and chaos. "Grazie a Dio," he whispered. Around us, his men were already beginning a rapid retreat, gathering intel and injured comrades, making evidence vanish. Lorenzo gently brushed a streak of soot from my cheek. "And you? Are you safe?" I nodded, emotion catching in my throat. "Now I am." Outside, red and blue lights flickered against the windows. "Boss, we need to go." "Now," Marco urged, jogging up. Lorenzo kept hold of my hand as we hurried out through the staff exit into the same alley where this saga began. An SUV screeched up, rear door flung open. We piled in with Marco at the wheel and tore off into the night just as police cars rounded the corner behind us. Only when we had put several blocks between us and the sirens did I collapse back against the seat, exhaustion hitting me like a wave. It was over. Ruggieri was defeated, his surviving crew in disarray or captured. Bianca was safe, likely on her way to the secure hideout Lorenzo's people had arranged. And I was in the arms of the Mafia boss I had met only months ago as a wary customer on my waitressing shift. Lorenzo's arm remained firmly around me, anchoring me to reality. His cheek was smeared with blood and soot, a thin cut slashing across his temple. I reached up without thinking and wiped a smudge from just below his eye. He leaned into my touch, eyes drifting shut for the briefest moment. "You should be with your sister," he murmured, though his arm tightened around me. "She's safe," I repeated. "Thanks to you. To us." He opened his eyes and looked at me, really looked at me, in a way that made my heart turn over. "Chiara, 2 days ago you were a stranger who served me dinner. Now you're—" He broke off, searching for the words. I offered them gently. "Now I'm wherever I'm meant to be." A slow smile curved his lips. He lifted my hand and brushed a kiss across my knuckles, an old-world gesture that ignited a warmth in me greater than any adrenaline high. "Sempre insieme," he said softly. "Always together." 2 years had transformed everything, yet nothing had changed at all. I stood on the balcony of Vitale Enterprises, headquarters, an innocuous name for Lorenzo's sprawling business empire, overlooking the twinkling lights of Rome. 6 men in suits sat around the conference table behind me, stealing furtive glances through the glass walls at the blonde woman reviewing their dossiers. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had gone from serving wine to mob bosses to psychologically profiling potential mob soldiers. "Signor Bianchi," I said, stepping back inside and addressing the most nervous of the lot. "Your micro-expressions when discussing loyalty scenarios suggest you might have conflicting interests." I noted the involuntary twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Perhaps gambling debts." His eyes widened in alarm that I'd plucked the thought from his head. Next to the one-way mirror, I knew Lorenzo was observing, deciding who among these candidates would join our organization and who would be eliminated, figuratively from consideration, literally if they were plants. In the 2 years since that fateful night, I had fully integrated into Lorenzo's world. After Ruggieri's downfall, a delicate balance of power had been restored in the Roman underworld, with Lorenzo at its apex. We had expanded the restaurant holdings from 1 location to 12 across Italy, legitimate businesses that provided both profit and cover. I, in turn, had established a consulting firm specializing in security and behavioral analysis. It was a convenient front that allowed me to use my psychological expertise to vet Lorenzo's personnel and sniff out threats before they materialized. I dismissed the nervous applicant and concluded the session. 3 of the 6 candidates would be quietly dropped due to red flags I'd spotted. The other 3 would soon receive offers to manage various aspects of Lorenzo's operations. Legitimate jobs on the surface, with shadow responsibilities underneath. As the candidates departed, I felt a familiar strong arm slide around my waist. Lorenzo had entered the conference room, a rare grin playing on his face. "Impressive as always, Dottore," he murmured, using the honorific half-teasingly. He knew I reveled in finally applying my doctorate in criminal psychology to something that mattered deeply to both of us. I turned and rose on tiptoes to kiss him. A brief, soft kiss that nonetheless made my pulse quicken. Even after 2 years together, the spark hadn't dimmed. If anything, it burned brighter now that I stood by his side as partner and wife. Yes, wife. Mrs. Chiara Vitale, as of 1 year ago, in a private ceremony at a small chapel with more armed guards than relatives in attendance. We left the conference room arm in arm. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the Rome skyline. The air smelled of impending rain and jasmine from the planters on our office balcony. Valentina has the quarterly reports ready for our meeting with the restaurant division tonight, I reminded him, skimming through a summary on my tablet. Profits are up 20%, and Marco reports no major security issues this quarter. No attempts from law enforcement to slip anyone inside, Lorenzo asked casually as we walked toward the elevator. Not since that Interpol plant I flagged last year, I replied. It seems word has gotten around that we're not so easily infiltrated. I pressed the button for the garage level. Have you given more thought to expanding to Milan? He smiled down at me. He still couldn't believe how seamlessly I had embraced both halves of our enterprise, the clean and the dirty. If my wife thinks it's wise, who am I to argue? I laughed lightly as the elevator doors opened to our private parking area. I think it's wise. Just leave the negotiations with the northern families to me. They respond better to behavioral carrots than sticks. As long as I get to keep a stick in reserve, he joked, though we both knew there was truth beneath it. Our driver pulled up in a sleek town car. Before we got in, I paused, catching sight of my reflection in the polished black window. A confident woman in a tailored suit looked back, a far cry from the unsure waitress in an apron I once was. Lorenzo waited patiently, sensing my moment of introspection. I was just thinking, I said softly as we slid into the car and it glided out onto the street, about how much has changed. Lorenzo entwined his fingers with mine. Any regrets? I looked at him, my partner in all things, the man who had given me a purpose beyond anything I'd imagined, and I smiled. None. We stayed there in each other's arms as the late sun dipped low, painting the eternal city in hues of gold. Outside, Rome glimmered and hummed, eternal as ever. 2 years ago, I had walked away from this man after that first violent night, convinced our morals were irreconcilable. Now I wore his ring, comfortable in a life that was dangerous, challenging, passionate, and deeply fulfilling. I thought of my sister Bianca, finishing her graduate studies in Paris now, thriving again under our watchful eye and generous scholarship. I thought of Julia, who still texted me gossip from the restaurant world. She believed I'd landed a high-profile security job with a private firm, which wasn't far from the truth. And I thought of the naive woman I'd been, convinced that moral absolutes could govern complex realities. My journey taught me that sometimes the only way to defeat the monsters was to partner with one, albeit a man with a conscience hidden under layers of scar tissue. In doing so, I'd found the love of my life and a purpose greater than I'd ever imagined. As Lorenzo and I turned to head home for the evening, toward a villa now filled with warmth and the promise of a future built together, I cast one last glance at the Roman skyline. So much of our story was written in these streets, in blood and in love, and our next chapter was just beginning in seam together.